Welcome to the latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast, episode 46. Austin Render with Dalton Shetler, your hosts here on this Tuesday, April 8th. Dalton, the basketball season has officially come and gone. We are now out of basketball games, but a fun season, and we've still got plenty to talk about. As we know, the basketball on the court ends, but the basketball conversation never ends with the transfer portal, with all sorts of stuff. Dalton, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm a little bit groggy after staying up for the men's title game that ended. It felt like at 4 a.m. But it's one thing I really appreciate about the women's game is being in the middle of the Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
But no, doing good, excited, and you're kind of right. You know, it's funny. You remember it had to be like a decade ago where the NBA had almost became more interesting in the offseason with free agency than what the actual season was.
Yeah.
That seems like college basketball has a pretty good element of that too, with the portal being what it is.
We are definitely getting close to that point. We're going to talk transfer portal plenty here today. We're also going to discuss, we're going to do our first half of the exit interviews to make sure we weren't providing favoritism or anybody thought we were providing favoritism. We simply just are going to go alphabetically, I through W. So we'll knock out the first 9 this week, 9 more next week. But first, I want to let you know we're on the Back Home Network YouTube channel, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. Come join us live on the YouTube page every Tuesday at noon Eastern time. You can catch the videos after the fact there as well. We're also available on Apple and Spotify podcasts. UCLA, not a showing they would have liked in the Final Four, but the one thing I think they can rest on is the fact that nobody competed with UConn pretty much in this entire tournament. USC's little third quarter surge was about as close as anybody got to touching the Huskies in this entire tournament. They were unbelievable. Paige Beckers was awesome, but Sarah Strong is going to be a problem in college basketball moving forward. And just a lot of fun to watch that team that we've seen broken up the past couple of years with injuries, and to see AZ Fudd and Paige Beckers on the same floor together, both playing well. They played great. UCLA just did make shots. I mean, we've said this so many times this year. You're going to see doubles and triples sent at Lauren Betts. When they're making shots, they are impossible to beat. And I think they airballed more threes in that game than they made. It just was a total off night for UCLA. The game I had circled in the Final Four, I thought that would be the highlight game, UCLA against UConn. But as good as the Bruins are offensively, their defense really, really took out UCLA from its rhythm.
No, I completely agree. I think you nailed this one on the head. I mean, what UConn became, nobody was going to beat, and we saw that pretty evidently. And you nailed it. The irony, too, was that USC's being the only team to push them was without their superstar Juju Watkins. And you kind of wonder, well, maybe if Juju was healthy, how does that play? But UConn was on a mission, and it's just kind of hats off. It's one of those things. I thought Lauren Betts played pretty well in that Final Four game, but you're right. It just wasn't enough help from the perimeter to get that one done. UConn was playing like a buzzsaw. I don't know how else to put it. Yeah. I haven't really seen somebody dominate so many top teams, so many 1 seeds. They beat 3 1 seeds, and it wasn't close. I haven't quite seen something like that. I mean, it was an impressive run from UConn here at the end. And Austin, I know there's all sorts of different conversations. We got the exit interviews. We got a bunch of different stuff. But if I can get on my soapbox or get something off my chest for a moment.
Please, that's what this podcast is for, yes.
Dalton's thoughts. It's scary. There's a reason that's not going to be renewed. But a big thing to me, too, with women's basketball and with this championship game, we just got the ratings back. And the ratings of the championship game were just shy of 9 million, I believe. And there's been a lot of discourse I've been seeing online about how it's plummeted since Caitlin Clark. And it's really, it goes to show people tuned in for Caitlin Clark, and that was it. I just want to throw out the context. The 2 years before Caitlin Clark in the run to the championship game for the Hawkeyes in those 2 years, the ratings were just north of 4 million for that championship game. Then Caitlin Clark came around, and I think the first championship game was 9 or 10 million. And I think Last year was 18 million. It was a huge number, right? Gaudy number, record.
Yep.
I don't think anybody expected it to stay 18 million from here on out. Everybody, I believe, within women's basketball knew it was going to dip, but it dipped to 9 million. That's still over a 200% increase from what it was before the boom of Caitlin Clark. So 9 million is nothing to sneeze at.
Yep.
And it goes to show how exponential and sustainable the growth of women's college basketball is. And it also goes to show that women's college basketball should have its own TV deal. It should be able to test the market on its own and negotiate, because $9 million is nothing little. I mean, that's bigger, I believe, than the Stanley Cup Game 7 that
Yeah.
just in this last year. And that was a huge deal between the Panthers and going against Connor McDavid. So there were stars or all those elements. That goes to show you how big women's college basketball is. So don't get lost in the narratives of that it's sinking because Caitlin Clark is gone, because this is a real thing. 9 million is nothing little.
No doubt. No doubt. And I think ESPN airing all the games on its network, making things easy to find throughout the tournament does help. The curious next question, Dalton, is if we're thinking of like, and I didn't enjoy this rhetoric of the torch was being passed from Caitlin Clark to Paige Beckers or Juju Watkins, whoever it was. But if we're going with the torch passing metaphor, Juju's probably not going to play next year. Paige is gone. So now who steps up? Who fills that void? Is it a Malaysia Fulwiley? Is it Lauren Betts? Is there somebody that's going to become that person who is going to be the endearing, somewhat lovable if you're rooting for them, maybe a villain for the other teams? Like, I mean, let's be honest, Caitlin Clark brought all these viewers in. They weren't all rooting for Caitlin Clark. There was a little bit of a villainous to her, which the game needs.
Yes.
That's why when Duke is in a big game on the men's side, it draws so many eyeballs, because half the country, maybe 3/4 of the country, is rooting against Duke.
Yep.
And that matters. So I'm curious who is going to take that next step to become that person in college basketball.
Well, and the beautiful thing to that point, Austin, that I think is the women's game, much unlike what the men's game has went through in recent times, still has a lot of the old guard around. Gino Auriemma, and if you saw the social media speech he had today where he talked about a lot of schools, you win a national championship, you put a statue outside. Here at UConn, you can't be on the front of the bus. And it felt like shade and kind of a shot at South Carolina. There's a real rivalry there between Don Staley, Gino Auriemma. Kim Mulkey is described as a villain by a lot of different people. So the coaches are still around in the women's game. And even if there aren't maybe the player stars, and I think there are, but that's something different than where on the men's side, Coach K's gone, Roy Williams is gone, Jay Wright is gone, Jim Boeheim's gone, Calhoun's obviously been gone for a little bit. I mean, you still got a couple. Patino comes back in a different form every decade, it feels. Tom Izzo's there. But you know what I mean? Like that's something the women's game really has that's pretty sustainable, is the leaders on the sideline too.
Yep. The leadership is good. And I think I'm not saying all this is a bad thing. I think it could be a really good thing for the women's game that we're going to have some people become stars next year that maybe don't know it yet. And I think that's kind of an exciting proposition. Maybe it's Sarah Strong of UConn. Maybe she's the one. UConn's hard because, let's be honest, UConn plays a couple games a year that are big time, but in the conference, they kind of disappear.
Yeah.
And you don't see a whole lot of UConn when they're in the Big East because the Big East struggles. So I'm just curious who's going to be that person or people. That there's obviously so much talent in this game now. It doesn't need to be one person. That's why we made this podcast, because there is more than one person who's talented in the Big Ten. And we're certainly trying to promote that. And the Big Ten's going to have a lot going on, Dalton. So as we wrap up, and we'll certainly talk more about UCLA and their exit interview next week, but let's talk a little bit of transfer portal. This is hot off the presses, Dalton, from Talia Goodman 54 minutes ago. So I guess that's not in transfer portal news. That's old news 54 minutes ago, but
it's lukewarm.
Yeah. Avery Howell, the USC transfer, is heading to Washington. That is along with the news this morning that Yulia Grabovskaya from Michigan is also going to Washington. So in the current form, Washington looks pretty formidable. We know that they have a lot in Steins and Sellers and Ledeen, who all have the option to come back. Nobody's entered the portal yet. So assumingly they're going to have a really good group for Tina Langley to work around. Avery Howell, as soon as she hit the portal, I was very intrigued because I think that she's really going to blossom somewhere in her sophomore year. And boy, Washington, I think, landed a big one right there.
No, and that's why for the visual audience, you just saw me kind of point to Austin. We think alike in a lot of different ways. And when Hal's name hit in too, I had the same reaction. I was like, oh, somebody's really
Were you
going to get
thinking
a
about what
steal
she was
here.
going to look like in green and white?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, that's the beauty of the transfer portal,
That's what
right?
we do. You see somebody go in the portal, and you think about, ooh, what if that person comes my way? And I think a lot of teams were doing that with Avery Howell.
She's very talented. I think Washington landed a really good one. It was interesting to me that the Huskies quickly, and it feels like some teams have this effect in the portal, right? Where it's just back to back. Here's huge commits in interconference commits, and they're not the only ones with the interconference commits. There's one in College Park that's picked up a couple of players, and I know a little bit to the chagrin of you, Austin.
Well, that's where we were going to go next. Maryland has had a great portal season already. They obviously had a huge portal season last year that allowed them to assemble this regional hosting type of team. With Cheyenne Sellers leaving, they still have Kayleen Smeichel, Dalton, and now they're going to pair her up with Yarden Garzone, who transfers from Indiana to Maryland, one of the best shooters in college basketball, along with somebody like Smeichel, who's terrific at getting to the basket, a good downhill driver, which I think is huge to pair with somebody like Garzone. And then they add Gracie Merkel from Penn State as a physical big presence down low. So just with those three right there, and we're going to talk Maryland today, just those three, that's big time for Brenda Fries, who continues to just pile in from the portal. Couple people who have transferred out of the Big Ten. Gabby Elliott is on her way to Arizona State. Grace Hall to SMU. Sophie Swanson of Purdue is on to Virginia Tech. Tessa Grady of Wisconsin going to Coastal Carolina. But some of the big names still available right now that you're waiting on. Sarah Williams, Carter McRae, a couple of Badgers there. We just mentioned Avery Howell is going. I think Kaylee Heckle, is an interesting one as well. USC is going to look really different, Dalton, because Juju presumably out. Kiki Iriafen has graduated. So did Rhea Marshall. And Kennedy Smith is still there, but the rest of her freshmen have transferred. So it's going to be a very different team there in LA. Other big names, Kaomi McMiller is still out there. Cody McMahon is a huge one that we're still waiting to see. Double-digit scorer Mariah Murray. So there's still a lot of talent out there. A lot of Indiana's bench is still available. Lily Meister kind of headlines that group. So there's still going to be a lot of movement here over the next couple of weeks. We saw Olivia Miles commit to TCU. I think that came out this morning. So we're going to see a lot of movement coming up here over the next few weeks. But Maryland and Washington are the early winners of the portal, because they have signed multiple players that are good, but B, they haven't lost anybody to the portal. That's obviously Cheyenne Sellers and some of the others like Sarah Tibiasu have graduated, but the portal's been empty for Washington and Maryland. They've only added. And I think they, so far, here on April 8th, have been two of the winners.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, I mean, you kind of framed it just right. We're going to see more Big Ten teams involved in the portal, but early on to see them get a couple of players each, it's been pretty big. They're the early winners for sure.
And I believe they have, so the portal closes on April 22nd, so 2 weeks from today. So still time for those teams in the Final Four, and still time for maybe your team picks up somebody in the portal, and now you're concerned about where your minutes just went, and
Yeah.
they could jump into the portal. So we're still very early in this process, but that's the early portal update. All right, let's talk about some teams. Let's wrap a bow around some seasons, and we're going to go alphabetically here from Illinois all the way through Wisconsin. Today will be 9, and then next week we'll do 9 as well. I know you have a hard out at the top of the hour, so let's keep this thing going. You start us off with Illinois, the first team of our exit interviews and a team that made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and taking a couple of moments to look back over the season it was for the Illini, because it's interesting, right? We all, with 18 teams, and as you're going through the end of the season, you kind of have your notes or your ideas of what the group is. But going back through, what Illinois did this season was simply remarkable. And we said that in these exit interviews, we'll talk about maybe the high moments of a team, the adversity a teams face, so on and so forth. For the folks, if you've already forgotten, Illinois, midway through the season, lost Makaira Cook, who was scoring 12 points a game, and lost Gretchen Dolan at 10.5 points per game. Both of those players only got to play 8 games for the Illini this season. So you lose both of those players, and you think, okay, what's Illinois going to be? And Shauna Green, in her third season there, leading the helm in Champaign, she had a wonderful year again. I mean, 2 of the years have just been magical there at Illinois, and one was mystifying. That was last year for Shauna Green in Illinois. The best wins for the Illini go back to February 2nd, the win over number 14 Maryland at Maryland, 66-65. That was the first Illini ranked road win since 2019. It was the first time they ever topped the Terps in program history. That's certainly, I think, the best regular season win, hands down. And then I threw in the postseason win, too. On March 22nd, they beat Creighton 66-57. That was their first tournament win since 2000. As part of the big dance. I mean, it's a quarter century. So got to highlight that. I mean, it's really incredible what they did. They were led by Kendall Bostic, nearly 16 points, 11 rebounds a game, shot 53% from the floor, set a new double-double program record with her work there in Champaign. Genesis Bryan, of course, was 15 points a game, had 124 assists. And then you had Adalia McKenzie, 13.5 points per game, Barry Wallace, 9 points per game. As you start to look at the future of Champaign, obviously Bostic gone, Cook gone, Bryant gone. But Wallace and Dolan can come back unless there's portal news that I haven't seen. Again, for the portal too, Austin, I think we've seen 1,200 plus players enter. That's like 25% of players. So we're not talking in absolutes when we go through figuring out some of the destinations and futures. But Barry Wallace, Gretchen Dolan, I believe both can come back to Champaign. Could set the Illini up pretty well, see what else they maybe bring in around that. But honestly, again, for the adversity it was, Austin, I'll give you a quick word at the end if you want it. What Illinois did this season was an A to A plus job, I think, from Shauna Green.
Yeah, and I like in exit interviews, we don't have to put like a letter grade on the season, but I would say overall, I'm with you. I think if you're an Illini fan, this year was a joy to watch the essentially 6 players that they had available that they trusted go out there and give you every ounce of effort they had over the course of the final 2 months of the season. They did a terrific job. I think if you're an Illini fan, you probably fell in love with the team that was out there. It's hard not to. A couple of bench players, Corey Allen and Shea Bolin, have entered the transfer portal for Illinois. But like you said, Barry Wallace and Gretchen Dolan kind of highlight. They had a big girl in, I forget how to pronounce her last name, but Letty was her first name. She was an international freshman who I believe had a knee injury before the season even began. So they'll have her hopefully back and healthy. They have another good recruiting class. So this will be interesting, though, for Shauna Green, because for her 3 years at Illinois, she's had Makaira Cook, she's had Genesis Bryant, she's had Kendall Bostic, she's had Adalia McKenzie. She's going to have none of those 4 next season for the first time. So this will be the test of, okay, what can we do to sustain this momentum?
And it can't be understated how good that core was.
So
Bostic's
good.
been the Big Ten's leading rebounder the last X amount of years. But I wanted to give you one chance too to talk a little bit about Barry Wallace, because had her freshman season, I think her breakout game, I think certainly it was
Yeah.
her breakout game, maybe still her best game in her freshman campaign, was against the Hoosiers. You got to see her at her tops, and it's going to be one of the things that Shauna Green builds around there for the future.
I mean, in Assembly Hall, place is getting loud. Hoosiers are making a run, and I think it's a 4 or 5 point game, and Barry Wallace just buries a corner three, just a dagger. And it was like, oh, okay. Like, and she was good the whole game, but that was just that moment, that freshman moment of like, oh, this girl's ready for like the big time.
Yeah.
And was very impressed coming away from that game with Barry Wallace. I would think with the style of play that Shauna Green has developed at Illinois and the way she turned Genesis Bryant, Adali McKenzie, all these players into stars, I would think that'd be a pretty attractive transfer portal destination for some of these players looking around. Next up in the alphabet is Indiana, another team that won an NCAA tournament game, bowed out in the second round. There's a similar sense of uncertainty to Indiana as there is to Illinois moving forward, but we'll talk about that in a moment. I think like the big moment of the season, kind of getting the monkey off the back of are they going to be in the tournament or not, was beating Ohio State at home, the way they did it so definitively. I think Indiana was hovering around that bubble, and people were starting to get a little concerned, and they just dominated Ohio State. It's the 7th straight season that Indiana has beaten a top 10 team. I would give an honorable mention to the win over Baylor in the Bahamas, a top 20 Baylor team that went on to host in the NCAA tournament. I think that win did a lot of heavy lifting for Indiana, and that was the Shea Chesky game with 34 points. I would say the best moment for Indiana, though, it's just another NCAA tournament win. I don't know if you saw the thing going around Twitter yesterday, Dalton, that there was a perfect women's basketball bracket except for Utah over Indiana. So that did make me chuckle a little bit. But 6 straight seasons in the tournament, 6 straight opening round wins, 7 straight opening round wins going back to the other tournament appearance Terry Moore made before this stretch of 6 in a row. They had an 8-point lead on South Carolina. They had the lead at halftime. They played so well in that game. That was kind of the adversity. We mentioned with Illinois, it was injuries. For Indiana, it was a slow start, which had to do with injuries. Lexus Bargesser did not play for the first 5 or 6 games of the season. And Lene Beaumont around the summer was having a great summer. They were building a game plan around her being a part of this team, and she goes down, never plays in a game the entire year. And obviously you're replacing Mackenzie Holmes and Sarah Scalia as well. So it took Indiana some time. They dropped 2 games early to Harvard and Butler, and it really took them kind of looking themselves in the mirror, figuring it out, which they did, and obviously still made it to the tournament. The players lost in the portal is a long list for Indiana. It's obviously headlined by their leading scorer, Yarden Garzone, 14.5 points a game, 41% three-point shooter, now on her way to Maryland. Presumably, if the schedule does what I assume it's going to do, which is flip-flop road and home next year, the Hoosiers will be in College Park, so Garzone will not come back to Bloomington. Lily Meister, Lexus Bargesser, Juliana Lamadola, Hennesson, Big Sharnies, Curry Jelks, all in the portal as well, still looking for their destinations. Curry Jelks is going to Murray State. The key returner is really just Shea Chesky off of the active roster. I think they're super excited about Lene Beaumont and what she's going to provide to the team, but we don't know totally yet. Didn't play a whole lot as a freshman, but her game reminds me a lot of Grace Berger, just watching her. And if you can develop another Grace Berger, that's usually a pretty good thing. So that'd be nice. And the Hoosiers have already added 2 from the portal. Chloe Spreen, who is a former Indiana Miss Basketball, played sparingly for Alabama last year. And then Phoenix Stoutine, I believe is how it's pronounced. I'm going to learn that by the start of the season. But Phoenix Stoutine from the Netherlands comes over from Arkansas to join the team. So some guard depth with Chesky and Beaumont, but still looking for a big and probably still 3 to 5 more players out of the portal for Indiana at some point. I would say the season was good, not great for Indiana, and I think they would probably agree with that. They got to the tournament. I think that's a big thing. If you're going to have a quote-unquote down year, which is what this was in comparison to the last 6 years for Indiana, I think if you can set your floor at we're not going to miss the tournament, that's when you start to establish a really good program. And Terry Moore made sure this team's going to be good enough to get in the tournament. They did. The senior leadership of Moore, McNeil, Parrish, and Striplin went a long way. Next year's team, as of right now, is going to be very young. Chesky will be a senior, but everybody else on the roster at the moment is a redshirt sophomore or younger. So we'll see if they add some more. I would imagine they're going to add some veteran experience out of the portal, but I just wouldn't bet against the Terry Moore and coach team. That just is my to the man or woman who picked Utah. Just don't do it. Just don't. You've learned your lesson. Indiana, pick them in the first round. But yeah, that's Indiana. A team that was similar to Indiana in the fact that they were totally replacing a legend in Caitlin Clark. That's the Iowa Hawkeyes. And they weren't just replacing her, Dalton. It was a whole new team with a whole new coach and a team that really grew up this year.
Well, and that gets lost a lot, right? It wasn't just Caitlin Clark. It was Kate Martin. It was Gabby Marshall. And, of course, Lisa Bluter. So Jan Jensen, after many years and the next chair over, finally gets her chance to be the head coach of the program. This one's interesting, right? Because they went in the portal last season and brought in an All-American, a leading scorer, and Lucy Olson from Villanova. And you kind of – not that you could fill the shoes of Caitlin Clark, but you're like, okay, we've got it semi-covered here. This is somebody who can put it in for us, fill it up. When you look at Iowa's season, certainly had some adversity, but I want to highlight the real big positives first. The best win, obviously, was also February 2nd when they defeated number 4 USC, Caitlin Clark jersey retirement night. It was a special time there in Carver Hawkeye. They beat Juju Watkins and the Trojans. 76-69 was that final. There's a lot of near wins when you go back through the season it was for the Hawkeyes in that back half. Nearly won at number 8 Ohio State. That one went to overtime. That was on February 17th. Nearly beat number 3 UCLA at home. They lost that one 67-65. That was all within a week. They nearly beat Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament as well. Lost that one 60-59. Other wins I'll just throw in there because I think you'll make the Hawkeye fans happy. Anytime you beat Iowa State, they beat Audrey Cooks and number 18 Iowa State back in December, 75-69. I also thought a pretty big win for Iowa, and it kind of solidified the way they played on that back stretch. Their win over Michigan State in that Big Ten tournament in the earlier rounds. I thought that was a big one for them. But the adversity part of the Hawkeyes, because it wasn't always so great for Iowa and Jan Jensen early. There was a lot of social media torches and mob picks and everything else for a few weeks because Iowa lost 5 straight from January 5th to January 19th. They lost to Maryland, Illinois, Indiana, Nebraska, and Oregon. Now, granted, something that we're kind of missing in real time or with the benefit of hindsight looking back at it, a lot of close games. They lost to Maryland by 8. They lost to Illinois by 5. They lost to Indiana by 7. Nebraska was an overtime game, and they lost to Oregon by 1. So they go through that from January 5th to January 19th. The very next game is part of that Pacific Northwest trip. It finishes with that loss to Oregon, and then they go to Washington, and they beat the Huskies 85-61. They shot 72% for the floor, 69% from 3, and that, to me, is where everything changed in the Iowa season, and they became a team that could become a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament and pick up those monster wins in the back half of the season that we kind of recapped there just a moment ago. Individually, Lucy Olson, 18 points a game, 162 assists. It took a little while, Austin, for Lucy to get into the groove that you expected. But once she did, it was lights out and really lifted the Hawkeyes to a lot of those wins. Hannah Stolke, they kind of had to tinker a little bit like Indiana did, where Indiana kind of had to figure out the best rotation, the best lineup to play. Iowa went through something pretty similar with O'Grady at the 5 and Stokey at the 4, and then they switch it to where Stokey's back to the 5 like she was the previous season. Stokey ends up with 13 points, 8 rebounds a game. The big news before the season even ended was that Iowa's going to get Kylie Feuerbach back.
That's
She's
huge.
returning to the Hawkeyes.
Yep.
Averaged 7 points a game, but defensively, she led the Hawkeyes with 43 steals on the year, and she's a knockdown shooter, tied for third on the team with 38 threes this past season. You add Feuerbach back, take Stokey back. There's some real legitimate foundational pieces for Iowa to build off of. And, you expect at least the Hawkeyes to be pretty active in this portal too, see who maybe they bring in to fill out the rest. But I thought overall, this is a really good job by Jan Jensen in her first year, especially to go through that adversity and to find a way to put this team together on the other side to where they run to a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament. I thought this was a tremendous job, and it's not the national title game 2 years in a row like what they've had. And as you were talking a little bit about Indiana, Austin, that relative to the years past, this is considered a down year for Iowa, but nonetheless, when you pick off a win over Juju Watkins and USC, you had all these big moments throughout the course of the season. This was a really good year for the Hawkeyes as well.
Yeah, and they have a young core to build around. I know that Aaliyah Guyton is in the portal, but you have Stremlo, Hayden, and Mulaney, who all got meaningful minutes at some point in time throughout the season and made their impacts. I think they're going to be a great trio that really grew up. And that was where, when they were in that losing streak, it was like, okay, do we just start playing these freshmen? Because the upperclassmen were really struggling. Lucy Olson wasn't playing in the final minutes of games during that stretch. She was benched against Indiana. She didn't play in the final few minutes. And she figured it out. Sydney Falter figured it out. Kylie Feuerbach figured it out. McCabe was a knockdown three-point shooter. And give Jan Jansen a lot of credit, because it's hard. It's your first year as a head coach. You take over a team that's been in the national championship 2 years in a row, and you probably knew, but imagine Jan Jansen knew, looking at the roster, we're not going to a national championship this year. But it's hard to tell the fans that. And so the fans come out with their pitchforks ready to burn things down, and she handled it very well. So I think the Hawkeyes have a very bright future. Guyton is the only transfer out of the program, and I think you're right. They would have to be a desirable place for transfers, you would think.
Oh, especially as people take a look at what they did with Lucy Olson this year and the big years she just had in the Big Ten and all the moments they had. And, it's funny, Austin, and not that necessarily in the exit interviews we're going to rip anybody or have a plenty of negative things or toxic things to say, but going alphabetically, we got a lot of really good teams at the top. I mean, these have been 3 pretty good seasons to recap already.
Yeah, should we have a paid subscription where we go behind a paywall and we're a little bit more harsh on teams? Should we offer that to people?
First Take gets a lot of ratings, Austin.
Well, let's keep going with the good teams, because you're right. We're going to have, every one of my teams that I have on my list is a tournament team. And I think just about every team, I think Minnesota, and they won a championship at the WBIT. We're going to review a lot of good teams here in this first episode. Maryland is my next team. Kayleen Schmeichel, what an addition she was. 18 points a game, 35% from three. A great pair with Cheyenne Sellers. Those two really played well together. But I think the most impactful person they picked up, Dalton, was Sarah Tibiasu. And they were 2 years ago when they squeaked in the NCAA tournament and had that down year. Cheyenne Sellers was injured, but she was having to play a lot of point guard along with Bree McDaniel.
Yes.
And that's not totally their natural positions. So to add Tibiasu to this team and allow her to take that point guard duty off the shoulders of Cheyenne Sellers was huge. And obviously the adversity part of the season was they lose Bree McDaniel to the ACL injury in early January, late December, somewhere around the turn of the calendar year.
Had to be January, but yes.
And Cheyenne Sellers then goes down for a couple games as well. And to pile onto that, their schedule got really hard at that exact time in the season. They got blown out by Texas, lost to Ohio State, and lost to UCLA in a 3-game span when they were dealing with those injuries. So they were able to get Sellers back, and they had some great moments. I think shout out to early in the season, a game that goes very lost. They beat Duke by 5 in the
Yeah,
second game of the season.
forgot about that
And
actually.
Duke ended up being a number 2 seed. The fact they scored 85 on Duke. Like, that's a Duke team that's playing. I think that tournament game in Sweet 16 against North Carolina was like what, 47-36 or something like that.
That was a
And
slugfest.
it was 85-80 in College Park between Maryland and Duke. I think their best moment though was the double overtime win over Alabama, maybe the game of the tournament. 111, 108. They were down 17 in the third quarter. They came back and won. Shout out, though, honorable mention to the game-winning shot from Sarah Tibiasu in the regular
Against
season
Ohio State.
finale against Ohio State. That was awesome as well. They then had more adversity in the Big Ten tournament, getting just shellacked by Michigan. And to pick themselves back up from that, I think the 2 weeks off was huge for them. And to go and win that game against Alabama and really push South Carolina to its limits there in the Sweet 16. I would say, all in all, this is a really good year for Maryland. I think great for Maryland. They have higher standards, and so a great season is probably a Final Four for Brenda Frese at this point. If you wanted her to tell you it was a great season because of the pedigree that she and this program have. But I would say this was a really good season because they did not have a good year the year before. And so for them to go into the portal with so many unknowns, they took that foreign trip before the season. From talking to Coach Frese on the pod, she talked very highly of that trip and how that did a lot of good for them, bonding together. And they put the pieces together quickly. They beat Duke. They beat Syracuse early. They started the season with a ton of wins. In fact, they started the year 14-0 before losing a tight one to USC. So just a good, really good, solid year for Maryland, something to build on with Schmeichel coming back, Garzone and Merkel in the transfer portal. Hopefully McDaniel comes back healthy from her injury. Saylor Poffenbarger has another year as well. The only person in the portal right now for Maryland is Emily Fisher, averaged just 1.5 points a game. So a lot to build on for Maryland, who clearly over the past few years has shown the ability to bring in talent in the portal, whether that's money, whether that's the pedigree of the program. It's probably a mixture of all of the above, but they are a desirable spot for big name transfers. They've already landed 2 in this portal cycle. I would imagine they're still out there hunting for more, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with again in the Big Ten next year.
Yeah, it's for the longest time, and it still continues to be true. You fear Brenda Frese in Maryland. You fear the turtle, and they this year I think Austin put a little bit of that respect back on the name. Not that you lost it, but after that last year it felt different. And this year you looked at Maryland, and you're like, I don't want to play them.
Yes.
I just don't want to play them.
I think this next step for them, though, is to bring back that defensive mentality. Their defense has not been good the past couple of years. I would imagine next year that's going to be something we're going to see from Brenda Frese, is a better defensive team than they've had the past couple of seasons. Are we going to the Mitten State next? Is that what we get here? Is it your Spartans?
Yeah, let's do that. We'll head to the Mitten. I'll take Michigan State for pretty obvious reasons. Austin can take
Dalton,
Michigan.
I asked Dalton what teams he wanted. If he had any preferences, he said, "Can you just take Michigan?" I said, "Yeah, that's fine. I'll do Michigan."
That's if any of the Sparty listeners out there right now are kind of nodding along, they understand. So that's we're all playing nice today.
Yep.
We're all playing nice. For Michigan State, this was another pretty successful year, and just year 2 in the Robin Freilich era there at Michigan State. You get 22 wins again. It's a group that made it back to the NCAA tournament. It had been a while since it had been back-to-back big dance appearances for Michigan State, and they got a win in the tournament. Defeated Harvard in the first round there at NC State. That win was the first for Michigan State in 6 seasons in the NCAA tournament, with that 64-50 win over a good Harvard team led by the mid-major player of the year in Harmony Turner. So that was a big win. If you're looking at the other best wins, it actually involves the battle for the Mitten that was played in Ann Arbor. Michigan State trailed by 4 at halftime, ended up winning by 30 at the Chrysler Center, 88-58. That was against number 24 Michigan. That, by the way, if folks forget, that was the first ranked matchup in this rivalry's history between Michigan State and Michigan. So it went out with a bang for the Spartans back on January 25th. If you're looking at other big wins, I thought maybe the most complete game Michigan State played all season was at Illinois on January 19th. They defeated the Illini, a good Illinois team, 86-68. Theron Halleck had at that time what was a career high with 26 points in that one. She had 17 in the fourth quarter. That was the most ever scored by a Spartan in the fourth quarter. I thought that was maybe the most complete game they played. But can't forget for Michigan State, maybe some of the best basketball the Spartans played all season was back around Thanksgiving in the Acrisure Invitational Championship out in Palm Springs, California. And I don't think at the time we understood the gratitude, or not the gravity of, and the magnitude, that's the word I'm looking for, of those wins at the time, defeating Cal in the semis when they were down 16 to come back and beat the Golden Bears, and then to defeat Vanderbilt in that championship game. Look, later on, we discovered that Vanderbilt had maybe the best freshman in all the country, and Michaela Blakes. They would get a pretty decent seed in the NCAA tournament, as did Cal. I mean, both of those teams ended up being really, really good. So to come from behind in back-to-back games and win those, to win that tournament championship, that was a crowning moment for this Michigan State team as well. If you're looking at adversity, I directly looked to January 30th when they hosted Oregon. And for whatever reason, Oregon played one of its best defensive games, and they had a lot of good defensive games, but Michigan State could not figure out the riddle of Philly Che for 40 minutes. Just could not figure it out. The 6'8" forward in the middle for the Ducks just couldn't come up with answers. Were deterred from the rim at all angles and just couldn't figure it out. And then 2 games after that, they lost to Michigan at home. And following that loss, it was a stretch of UCLA, USC, Ohio State, all on the road in a span of 4 games. And that, I think, was really tough. You kind of wonder if the schedule had been maybe a little bit more balanced. Maybe you don't end with such a buzzsaw there at the end following those couple of tough losses. Maybe what could have been for Michigan State. But that's the adversity part. And it's just unfortunate that it led to the postseason. But for Michigan State individually, Grace Van Sluten, all Big Ten second-team member, 15.5 points a game, 7.3 rebounds a game. Julia Ayrault closes out her career as the most games played Spartan in program history, had 14.5 points a game, 7.3 rebounds a game. And Theron Halleck, who is all Big Ten honorable mention, of course, 2 years ago was the 6th player of the year, 13.3 points per game. If you're looking to project for the future, obviously you lose Julia Ayrault if you're Michigan State, but Grace Van Sluten to be back, Theron Halleck to be back, that's 2 pretty good pieces to build off of. Now for Michigan State, even though it's not the leading scorers, but you also lose Jocelyn Tate, who's one of your best defenders. You lose Jaden Simmons, another one of your best defenders, and Nyla Hampton, who's another one of your best defenders. So you bring back Van Sluten, you bring back Halleck, you get Ines Sotelo back, Julianne Woodard, of course, suffered the ACL tear, but was really starting to come into her own a little bit in her freshman season. I expect her to be a pretty decent piece. Emma Shoemate, the sharpshooter, who was hitting for most of the Big Ten season about 50% from 3. I mean, she started to kind of find a rhythm there in this back half of the season. And then whatever portal additions come for the Spartans, it projects well for Michigan State based on who they get out of the portal. They've got some good foundational pieces. But all in all, this was a good season. And the way I keep describing it, Austin, it was the clear next step for this program. Yeah. I mean, this is a program that hasn't won a Sweet 16 game since 2009. It's been 16 years, or not even won the Sweet 16 game, just gotten to the Sweet 16. Excuse me, let me correct that. So to go to back-to-back NCAA tournament appearances, especially given last year, we've talked about this, Austin, that team that Robin Freilich inherited had lost 3 of its top 4 production pieces, somehow got that group to the NCAA tournament, build it off of it, took the next step as a program, and it projects pretty well for Michigan State in the future too.
Yeah, I think Michigan State has a lot to be excited about, and I think you always think it's going to be this incline of
linear,
better every year.
Yeah,
that's not always the case. Sometimes you just need to sustain the success. I think that Michigan State might, I don't know if you would agree with this, Robin or Dalton, but Robin may think that you guys might have been a year ahead of schedule in year one. I would imagine Robin Fralick took the job until we're going to get to the tournament. I'm not doubting that. But I think most people probably thought it's going to take some time, and she shot him out of a cannon, gets him to the tournament first year. So to sustain that for year two and to not take kind of what Illinois did, to not take that step back and miss the tournament, I think is an all-in-all good thing.
I think you're right. And I think to the point of what you just said there about maybe the feelings of it, and talking with Robin ahead of the NCAA tournament this year, she said, last year we saw her name pop up and we just were excited. Hey, look at us. We're in the tournament. This is fun. Jubilation was felt in the room. This year, you saw the name pop up, you saw the opponent, and you said, okay, let's start scouting. Like it very clearly was, that's not where we want to just settle for anymore. Yeah. And I remember courses of games and interviews with Robin throughout this year, where last year there were so many close calls, right? Caitlin Clark hits the half-court game winner against Michigan State. They battle Indiana to a shootout of 94-91 in Assembly Hall. They battled Ohio State and lost just by 5. That was all in the first year of Robin Fralick. This year, I remember interviewing after a tough loss to Maryland, where Michigan State was down double digits, came back, tied it up late in the fourth, and ended up losing at the very end, single digits, and said, you got to love the effort of coming back. And Robin goes, that's not good enough anymore. Like there is a very intentional and tangible next step for this program. I think they took it, and I think they're still looking to take another step heading into next year.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And they share the Mitten State with a team that kind of did what Michigan State did the year prior, which is come out of nowhere and have this incredible season. I think Michigan is probably in the top 3 of teams in the Big Ten of happiest at the end of their season. I think maybe even top 2. I just really have to feel good about the momentum in Ann Arbor. This was a team nowhere on the radar. They had lost, obviously, they were dealing with so much departure from the year prior. Layla Filia going to Texas was the big, and a lot of it came as a surprise to the staff. So they put this team together. They had faith in their recruiting class. They didn't really do a whole lot in the portal. It was mainly just, you know what? We're going to reset with youth. And they did it, and that youth grew up on day one. That might mean that they were just already grown. I don't know if they were ever freshmen. I mean, first game of the year, they almost beat South Carolina. And Olivia Olson leads the way, but Silas Swords also at 16 a game, Mila Holloway at 10 a game. Jordan Hobbs took a big step forward as kind of the leader of the pack. She and Greta Kampschrader, the returnees. I think the best moment of the year, there's 2 of them for me. Unfortunately, at the hands of your Spartans, I think the win at Michigan State was kind of the marquee win they had been searching for. They had been so close all year to beating a really good ranked team. They had lost to South Carolina and Oklahoma, and I'm trying to think of who else they had lost to. Ohio State. There's other top 10 teams they had played. Gosh, this is gonna kill me now.
I'll take a look. You
tell me. But anyway, they get that win over Michigan State. There's a couple other moments. The Big Ten tournament quarterfinal where they blew out Maryland was a sensational watch. And then Jordan Hobbs in her final run in the NCAA tournament, career high 28 in the win over Iowa State to get them a come from behind victory and into the second round of the NCAA tournament. The fact that this team not only made the tournament, but won a game in the tournament is huge. Now, they had some adversity, back-to-back games. They got shelled by Michigan State in the second half and then lost at Wisconsin, but they bounced back again, as we mentioned, by beating Michigan State the second time through. So I think you were playing with house money this year if you're Kim Barnes or Rico, and the fact that it went this well, I think Michigan has one of the more positive outlooks of anybody in the country. Yulia Graboskaya has transferred out, but Olson, Swords, Holloway are back. And then you're looking for a post in the portal. I would think that in the Sarah Williams sweepstakes, in the Cody McMahon would be tough to go from Ohio State to Michigan, but it's been done before. But I would think, especially in the Sarah Williams sweepstakes, Michigan's got to be involved in that, you would think, because they're a really solid forward away from this team being really dangerous next season. So would imagine they're active in the portal for the 4 and 5 positions, but a really good positive year for Michigan for sure.
Oh, I agree, and I think in terms of a young core, you'd be hard pressed to find a team that's more excited about a young core than what Michigan has coming back. In terms of the non-conference, I found a win over Virginia Tech as well, but the losses were to Oklahoma and to South Carolina, like you mentioned, and of course they picked up a win.
And then
in the
I just wasn't thinking of USC and UCLA as well. So that was where they had played all those top 10 teams.
Yep, absolutely. Let's shift over to the next.
Let's do one more. I know you've got a heart out, so let's do one more. And I know we promised 9 and 9, but we can have a longer episode next Tuesday, and we'll jam in the rest of them. So let's finish on this last one that you've got here.
And let's head to the land of 10,000 lakes. The Gophers are swimming in a tournament
championship. The only Big Ten team to finish on a win.
Absolutely. It's actually a pretty good. Well, you know what? We should check and see. Did somebody finish the regular season and miss the Big Ten tournament?
No, because Penn State would have lost their final to Rutgers. Northwestern lost their final to Nebraska, and Purdue lost to Indiana.
Okay.
So I think it's only Penn State, the only Big Ten team who ends on a win.
It's a weird quirk, though, in the future that could end up being different for some groups. But yeah, Minnesota, you mentioned it. They got the win in the WBIT 75-63 over Belmont. That was just about a week ago. It was last Wednesday. They hit 9 threes in that game. In the semis, they defeated Florida as well, which is notable, 66-52. But honestly, in the backstretch of that WBIT, they just ran through teams. I mean, it was dominating. That title game against Belmont never really got close. They controlled it from the tip, and that was just about all there was. The other really good wins for the Gophers this past year, they defeated a receiving votes Illinois team back on January 5th, 68-61. Also defeating Indiana. Coming to the chagrin of you, 66-56 on February 9th.
I'm just a Big Ten women's basketball fan. You know what? I'm in this for everybody.
That's right. They had some close ones. Lost in overtime against Ohio State, if you remember, when the Buckeyes were number 8 in the country. I thought all in all, and this is kind of the same ilk or cloth of our conversation of Illinois, given the adversity Minnesota faced, which was losing Mara Braun, who only got to play 5 games this season for the second straight year. They lose their star player, and they found a way not only to make the WBIT, they were in distance at the end of that regular season to maybe make the big dance. But they go to the WBIT and they run through it without their star. I mean, that's really incredible work. That stretch at the end of the season that kept them away from the NCAA tournament was losing to Washington, you remember, 72-62. Then they lost at Michigan State, 73-58. And then they still had a chance in the Big Ten tourney, but lost to Washington again, 79-65. That was a rough stretch, a piece of adversity as well. And you wonder, okay, now we know we're not going to the NCAA tournament. What is there left? You kind of have maybe some of those feelings at the end, but they found a way, and a lot of credit to Don Plitzawai, who I think has really gotten every ounce of potential in these last 2 years from that Minnesota team, especially, again, without their star, Mara Braun. A lot of credit goes to her to get them to run through the WBIT the way they did. Individually, Grace Graholski had a big year, more than 13 points a game. She had 72 threes, also had 108 assists, 5 rebounds a game. She kind of did it all for the Gophers. Amaya Battle, this is another pretty promising piece, 13 points a game, 5 boards a game, 154 assists. Tori McKinney, who actually ended up being the WBIT MVP, was at 10.5 points a game, 88% from the free throw line. All of those should be returning the upcoming season. So if you, knock on wood, you get Braun healthy for a season, what Minnesota could be is really scary. But all things considered, as we recap the year that was, that's a great year given the adversity and what this Minnesota team had to overcome.
No doubt. No doubt. And we've seen Mara Braun at her best can be a dynamic scorer. Now, off of 2 season-ending injuries, I don't think it's fair to expect her to go back to the 18, 19 points a game, but her team around her is now better than it was when she was averaging those numbers. So you add her in and she just becomes another double-digit scorer. That's huge and gives you something to that offense that can be additive. So certainly a team that I would imagine is, I think, disappointed that they didn't get in the tournament, but clearly not disappointed enough to just hang their heads. They were ready to just keep moving. And I think that's such a good coaching job by Dawn Plitzuweit to get her team to buy into the WBIT after they had to buy into the WNIT the year before. It would have been easy for these players to be like, I mean, we did this last year. Like, we wanted to be in the big tournament. But they bought in. They ran the table. They win it all. They end on a victory. You hope you get a healthy Mara Braun back next season. You get a lot of the supporting cast back, who is no longer a supporting cast. They become like main actors now with the way they've played. And I think that's a team that will be ready to make that NCAA tournament jump next year.
I think you're spot on with all that. And it's interesting. I just was recapping in my head. So we talked about, 7 teams today?
Yes.
I think it was 7 it ended up being. We credited the job of Dawn Plitzuweit. I mean, she has been incredible. The fire she coaches with has been amazing to observe, and you could see how she could get her team into the mindset of playing for the WBIT. But you talk about Dawn Plitzuweit, Kim Barnes-Arico, we know how good she is. She built that program at Michigan into what it became with Nas Hillman and everything else they've had there. Robin Freilich, it's hard not to be impressed with the job she's done early on. Brenda Fries, we know about her pedigree. Jan Jensen did a great job in year 1. You have Terry Morin, who we talked about. You never count out Terry Morin. And what she's done with Indiana's program is simply amazing. And then Shauna Green in 3 years. I mean, we talked about 7 teams today. All 7 of these coaches grade out high. And it goes to show, too, Austin, just it might sound like an easy thing to lob out there, but the coaching in Big Ten women's basketball is off the charts. I mean, that's so ridiculous.
Good. It's so good. And, I mean, we haven't even mentioned the Big Ten Coach of the Year in Lindsey Gottlieb, the National Coach of the Year in Corey Close. We're going to talk about Amy Williams next episode and Kevin McGuff. There's just so much talent in this league. Tina Langley turning Washington around into a tournament team again. So much more. We're going to get to the other 11 teams next week. I promise we will get to you if you were not part of today's show. We will get there, unless the portal just continues to become nonsense and we have to continue to talk about that. But as it stands, we will get to the rest of the teams next week. Dalton, that was fun. It's fun looking back because, like you said, you can, in our jobs, we can get fixated on our team. And even then, it's 18 teams. It's hard to keep track of what everybody's doing. So it's fun to go back down memory lane a little bit. And just a tiny prognostication of what might happen next year. Of course, everything is still a game of musical chairs right now with the transfer portal. But we will be back next Tuesday to get the rest of the teams knocked out. We'll talk a little bit more next Tuesday about our off-season plans. We will not be, after next week, we will not be putting out an episode every Tuesday. I believe we're going to shoot for every other Tuesday. We're going to try and bring some guests on. We're going to try and keep things very fun over the summer. But Dalton and I are going to need just a hint of a break over the summer. So we are going to cut it to one episode every 2 weeks. And that way we can really focus on getting you guys some great guests on the show. Hopefully we'll get some broadcast personalities, maybe even some players or coaches. We'll do our best to provide some fun episodes for you. But that's it for this one, episode 46. Dalton, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next Tuesday.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
You can catch us on Apple and Spotify podcasts and on the Back Home Network YouTube channel. Thanks for the uploads of that one time 22 people who are watching us live here today. I would imagine the unique number is even higher than that. So thank you all for watching us. Go back and watch us live next Tuesday when we do the rest of the exit interviews. Dalton Shetler, I'm Austin Render saying so long for the Dribble Drive.